All right, 8:37 on Hot Talk 99.5. From that to higher education, let's go to the phone. I'm sure you want to follow that up. Professor Rob Salvino is on with us right now from Coastal Carolina University's Department in Economics. Professor, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. That's quite a segue.
Yeah, I knew that would be a great segue, but it just kind of, I'm just top of mind. It just whatever kind of flows out. We talked to you. I was looking on my calendar. We had you in here. Well, first of all, in person as opposed to on the phone, which was how we used to do things. But it was about a month and a half ago. It was like the last week of February, as you were talking about the economic summit and pointing towards the fact that this should be a banner year as far as the Grand Strand is concerned. Things have changed a lot in the last 6 weeks.
They have changed, yes. And believe it or not, I actually watched part of that presentation just a couple weeks ago because it is so, I guess, telling. We were looking at coronavirus at the time as just something that was happening coming out of China. It was starting to maybe have its first cases in the United States and Washington. I can't remember exactly if it was at that time or not. But, we had said if anything can throw the economy off track, a shock might be the thing that does it. And this is certainly the shock. This is the shock that threw the economy, the global economy, into recession. And as an economist, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, or the National Bureau of Economic Analysis, actually considers 2 declining quarters of GDP a recession. So we really can't say a recession until the date passes much later in the year.
Right.
But we all know that this is certainly what a recession starts to look like as the numbers add up.
So I was going to ask you right away, as soon as the words came out of your mouth, what indicators do you see as that you believe we are absolutely in a recession?
So I look at sales information. I look at jobs. Those are the main things. Just today, I think Disney, or maybe it was this week, Disney's going to lay off. The number's astonishing. I think it's 500,000 people. I can't remember exactly what it is. But those types of numbers, right now we are being supported kind of, as best as possible with the generous unemployment support of the federal government, with the small business loans from the federal government. But there are many, many cracks and crevices where those do not make it or people are missed. This is a time where a lot of money is not circulating in the economy, and that spells recession.
Right.
Here for us, one of the major indicators is hospitality fees, and those have not come out yet, but those derive from occupancy rates. Occupancy rates are less than 10% nationwide, and that is devastating for our economy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as our economy is concerned, the last things I saw out of the CCU Center for Resort Tourism, that last week it was at about, 4%, 5% as far as occupancy for the total week. But if you look at year over year, 2020 versus 2019, we're still, the last 52 weeks are higher than the previous week. We're still on an upward trend, and we're not doing too bad. But obviously that's going to start as the weeks wear on here. It's going to wear down.
And that's only because the data hasn't come in and we're still building. We only have 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of negative compared to the previous entire year of positive. So really, in hindsight, none of that matters. All the past success doesn't matter at this point. It's about what's going forward. And going forward, we have legally no ability to entertain people in hotels. So that is that spells everything out. The first hospitality fee report, when it comes out, will be March, and that will start to show the signs of how significant this is. And it really just depends on when the federal government and state governments decide that it's okay to even suggest or change some things to allow people to get back to doing some of the things that make up the economy of, for example, here, the Grand Strand. And even as it legally comes back into action, other areas will prevent us from experiencing the same type of demand that we normally would.
At the last economic forum, when things were still looking rosy for us, I remember one of the speakers gave some really interesting information about how jobs drive the housing industry, which drives jobs, and they work in harmony, like a nice circle of life. But now that we don't have that, what do you think is going to happen to the housing market in the coming months?
Yeah, so if you look at the housing market right now, selling a home really depends on buyers and sellers being able to show what they have and view. Very little of the activity actually takes place online, virtual, looks. That's not really the majority of our market. And so it's very difficult to sell a home. I was looking for data this morning from the national housing market, and that'll, I think, April 21st, tomorrow, the first report from the national housing market comes in, and then we can start to look at our data as well. But there's no question that it has to be significantly down compared to last year, as these weeks of no one being able, and being in lockdown. Being in lockdown necessarily means we are not able to conduct some of these types of activities, and that translates directly into business, which then is income and jobs.
We're talking with Professor Robert Salvino from the Economics Department at Coastal Carolina University. He has his finger on the pulse of what goes on economically worldwide and here along the Grand Strand. Housing is one thing. As I saw a report just a second ago that one group put the Myrtle Beach area as the worst in the nation as far as the number of jobs that are reliant on hospitality. 33%, they said, of our jobs are in retail, food services, or service of some sort, and that was the worst in the country. Obviously, we've talked to you in the past about trying to diversify. Is this going to hammer it home to people that we need to diversify because we're so reliant on those kind of jobs?
Well, I've been the research economist here since 2010, and since I've been here, and I'm sure decades before that, diversifying the labor markets has always been a conversation. It's not as easy as just saying we should diversify.
Right.
You really just can't go out and diversify. We try to improve the labor force base with education, with opening markets up to different types of industry. But really, we are a tourist economy. We are the ocean drives everything here, and that's the way it always has been. And the types of activities that are not allowed, they hit here the most. There is no question about that. And so this is devastating for our economy.
So the president and many folks in Congress think that an infrastructure bill might be just the stimulus that we need to get the ball rolling toward a great economy again. You've many times talked about roads and infrastructure. Do you see that being a bright spot, something that could help this area?
Well, infrastructure bills are something for long-term investment. Right now, what we have is a whole different thing going on. This is, in the immediate term, we're talking about getting back to the types of activities that we make money on here in the Grand Strand. And for anyone, just as an example, who watches sports, they're talking of possibly for the next year, maybe even two, not allowing sports to take place physically. People will watch them on TV with no fans in the stands. So if that kind of logic carries on throughout tourism, Disney World, whatever it is, we make our money here because people come and are in proximity to one another in the restaurants. Changing that from a national policy perspective has significant ramifications in economies like the Grand Strand, where we really make our money in the physical environment. That is not what is being talked about as the way out of this type of pandemic recession, where the virtual economy is what is being kind of leaned on to bring us out of this and a way forward for normalcy. And normalcy in that way is not even feasible for an area like the Grand Strand.
So outside of a quick return to complete normalcy, as an economist, what ideas do you have that could help that maybe we haven't heard from the government and political leaders yet?
They need to start looking at the counties. We're doing research at the university right now. We're also doing research with the University of Central Florida, looking at demographics, at the built environment, at lifestyles, looking at counties, looking at zip codes, and trying to understand where the cases are the worst. Population density is a huge factor. Anyone who's looked at Worldometer and sees New York and New Jersey, that's driven by the New York City Metro. That metro is I'm looking at it right now. New York has 247,000 of the 765,000 cases in the United States. New Jersey has another 85,000. After that, you drop significantly. So the county experience is so important, and it is so different across the United States, whether you have high multifamily environments. Think about the difference here in this area, this suburban sprawl area with single-family detached homes. If you go to Home Depot during this lockdown, you're lucky to find a parking space, right? But if you're in New York City, when you come home, you are necessarily walking by people. So the lockdown in New York City is so real and so paramount compared to what it's like here. When we go home here, if we live in a single-family home in a detached neighborhood, we pull in our driveway, there is no way we are going to risk coming in contact with someone who might have the virus because our houses are separated. That's a completely different environment than the dense urban cities with multifamily housing. And the federal government and the states need to look to the counties and say, it's one thing that the federal government has said, let's look to the states for the way out. That's great. But the states then need to look to the counties and say, how are the counties doing? What's different across the counties? I think Georgetown County only has 33 cases, for example. So there really is a different type of experience going around the nation. And until states and the federal government and the policymakers allow counties to start to report back information and give some flexibility to say, okay, where can you open up? Then we're really at the mercy of the state and the federal government.
Professor, before we let you go, I wanted to find out how this is affecting you in the classroom. I mean, obviously, you're a professor at Coastal Carolina University. How are you switching over to the virtual world as far as teaching your students are concerned?
Yeah, so everything is online. Everything's virtual. Every meeting we have is either Zoom or Microsoft Teams or some type of format like that. Fortunately, I've been teaching online classes as at least a part of what I do since, I don't know, probably 2009 or 10. Okay. But one of the Coastal Carolina in general has been doing that type of thing. We're a young university, so we saw that online was something that the students just kind of expect. They come out of high schools, they take online classes in the high schools, and so that transition hasn't been so difficult for me. There was a class I was teaching, a real estate class it was partially online, partially physical. The transition, even with that, was difficult because there were some things we couldn't use our physical lab at the university. We have a computer lab, so we had to switch to some other things. But a lot of folks are struggling with that. It's really taking a lot of, I think, person hours just to create online content for classes that were not online before. And now we're all dealing with the question of when will we be allowed to go back into the schools, right? And also schools are another issue when we talk about lifestyle for the coronavirus. Families that have children in the K-12 schools, that is an area where diseases spread, right? So all of these things are so it's just so significant, the change that is being made to deal with this. The uncertainty is so high, and I think one thing I might have gotten right, because it's usually just a truism, is uncertainty is never good for the economy, and right now the uncertainty is off the charts.
Yeah. Professor Robert Salvino with Coastal Carolina University in the Economics Department. We always appreciate your insights on things. And as I mentioned earlier, between you and Taylor DeMont and some other people, I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot over the next few months to find out how things are going and where things are going. So I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon. To you again soon. To you again soon. To you again soon.